Listen up, you beautiful, beautiful people. From the shadow of Graceland, it's the 901 Soccer Podcast. I'm Scotty Smith, and I will be your host. We love Memphis, and we love the game. That's what we like to talk about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the 901 Soccer Podcast. Okay, it is official. I am back in the country, and I'm glad to be back here on the 901 Soccer Podcast, sitting down and talking with my good friend Isaac Walker, and we're going to just stop and reflect. This is going to be the Stop and Reflect episode. We're going to stop and reflect on club and country. It's the end of June, heading into July, and we are going to have a little bit of time here where instead of looking at tactical breakdowns of what 901 FC is doing on the field, we are going to look at some things that are, just kind of common across all of the matches. And what we want to do here is we've reached about a year and a half since the announcement, and we're coming up on 2 years. Yeah, that's right. We're coming up 2 years since we've known about this team. We're kind of going to look at it and say, all right, where are we? Where are we as a club? What is happening right now? Obviously, 901 FC is outside the playoff rankings right now. And, we're not going to dwell on that. We're going to hope we go on a run and sneak into that 10th spot. That'll be fantastic. If we have a little bit of playoff soccer, that'd be a great, great thing. But what we just witnessed on the weekend was a crowd of 8,300 people gathering to watch Memphis 901 FC against Pachuca. First half looked pretty good. 1-1 going into the halftime locker room. That's pretty great. Nice and competitive. Then in the second half, Pachuca brings on Leonardo Ulloa. Yes, that Leonardo Ulloa from the Leicester City championship run in 2016. He quickly scored 2 goals. We saw him score a lot of goals for Leicester in 2016. He scores a couple of goals, and the route was on, so to speak, 6-1. But that's not what the night was about. Let's start out, Isaac Walker. We're going to talk a little bit about attendance. We've each got a list of things here, and I just want to talk about the attendance. This was the, third or fourth time that Memphis 901 FC, not 2 teams playing in the stadium as an exhibition, but Memphis 901 FC has drawn 8,000 people. Tell me, when we learned about this team 2 years ago, did you think that a Memphis team could on 3 separate occasions draw 8,000 people in the sport of soccer?
I'm going to say yes, that I did think it was possible. I wasn't sure how likely it is. I think what we saw with Memphis City FC was that people were interested, but marketing is just the name of the game. And I think what we've seen is the Redbirds organization as a whole has done a phenomenal job with marketing the club, and people have responded. The location doesn't hurt either. Obviously, it's a big attribute of that. But in general, yes, you could see it. You could see the possibility, and it's kind of nice to be in the category not of untapped potential, but of realized potential. So it's really cool.
All right, what else do we want to – I'll say this about the attendance. I know that there were a lot of people there on Saturday night who were kind of, there because it was a Liga MX team, right? So you've got I was in the elevator in the parking garage, parked in the garage, got there a little late, parked in the garage. I was in the elevator with 3 different Liga MX jerseys, right? There was like a Chivas jersey, a Santos Laguna jersey, and a Monterey jersey. All right. So there were a lot of people there who weren't necessarily Pachuca fans. They were just there because it was a Mexican team, right? Maybe there might have been some people there who were just there to see a Mexican team beat up on an American team. Okay, so we got to reserve that as a possibility. In fact, I know for a fact that actually happened. But they seemed to be having a great time. I thought this was a brilliant stroke of marketing because it got people out to the stadium who had not been out to the stadium before. And then maybe they say, man, this is pretty cool. I'm going to come back when they're playing Pittsburgh, or I'm going to come back when they're playing Hartford, or, Orlando City B, or whoever it might be. I'm going to come out and I'm going to watch this team because this is really, really cool, and I'm just glad to have live soccer in the city.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think kind of a few of the other things we're going to talk about in the next few minutes add to that. I mean, it's one of those, you get them out, but with the big time opponent of a popular league, especially in the southern United States. And then you keep them with some of these other things, which kind of brings me to my next one, which is like, talking about the marketing they've done specifically on like the color schemes and the logos, the crests, their merchandise, their merchandising options. All of that, I think, has been very positively received from the community. It's great colors. The shield looks awesome. They've done a great job of putting their logo on really nice quality gear, whether it's shirts, scarves, hats, whatever it is. And I'm seeing the bumper stickers or the window stickers, and vehicles all over the place now. So I think there's that element that kind of endears you to the team and lets you say, hey, this is going to be my team, because you can get that stuff, and that's just kind of how you start it. I
saw two guys walking in the concourse. One of them was wearing a Mexican national team jersey. The other one was wearing a Pachuca jersey. They both had on Memphis 901 FC scarves. So just the idea, even though you're going to support teams that are, on FS1 or on ESPN on a frequent basis, or on Telemundo all the time, or Univision Deportes, whatever, having a local team is just cool for everybody, right? So we're hoping that maybe we can keep some of the folks that we've gotten with the merchandise, and just going into the pro shop. A lot of folks went into the pro shop for the very first time the other night and almost universally came out with something. The next one I'm going to talk about might seem a little trivial, but for people who are going for the event of it all, the pyrotechnics, that might seem really, really weird to somebody from another country that doesn't necessarily have pyrotechnics at games. You can't really think about the possibility of going and watching, let's say, Derby County versus Leeds United, and there being a lot of pyrotechnics. You don't even really see that in the Premier League. That's not necessarily a thing. But for people who are going for the event of it all, little things like that you could say are just attention to detail. It shows that the club is really going all out, and it does not feel like the soccer team is just a tax write-off for the baseball team.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it has to do with that fan experience that they're going for, and it's everything that they've done has been like first class. It's the pyrotech. I know you're talking mainly about the fireworks and stuff, but the pregame ceremonies, the celebrity guitar smasher that they do, all of it is building up to these family experiences where you look at yourself and you're like, hey, game Saturday night, that'd be a fun thing for the family to go do. And so you go and do it. The kids get to see the fireworks. You get a good game. The great atmosphere. It's downtown. There's so much going on. I mean, it's overall that fan experience has been number one priority for the club, and it's really paying off.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to cough for a little bit. What you got next on your list?
I think, again, piggybacking on that same kind of vein is the venue itself. So you have the merchandising, you have the experience and the events that they have going on, and then you actually have the stadium itself. I've been on the forefront of the you shouldn't play soccer in baseball stadiums, and I have been totally wrong. It has worked out great in that stadium. The view is from pretty much anywhere that you sit is really nice. The fans seem to enjoy it a lot. The march from the local spirit establishment to the stadium has really taken off. The local clubs being involved in pregame activities, walking out with the banners and with the players. The stadium itself has just really made the experience kind of on top of everything else. You could have great marketing and great events, and then you have a dump stadium, then it kind of takes away from it. But I think more than anything else, what you're seeing is like everything they're doing is first class, and it's really, really nice.
So we've played at Mike Rose twice, and I said, well, I always really wanted to see Mike Rose, full, and I was unable to go to either one of those games because of being at camp one time, El Salvador the other time. But the first time, we did not sell out Mike Rose. I mean, we only were looking at 2,000 people, and a lot of people were making the comments, the venue really does make that much of a difference. And we did sell out the second time because we were playing an MLS team.
Right.
But it was like, man, the venue really does make that much of a difference. You can get 8,000 downtown to see Loudoun United, but you can't get an Open Cup match. You can't get 3,000. So the being downtown in AutoZone Park, it really does make all the difference in the world. And like you said, the venue has been great. The sight lines have been great. The field is right up against the crowd. That's one thing that a lot of people worry about in a baseball stadium. Is it going to be way out there in the outfield? But it's been right up against the crowd. Crowd just feels like they're right on top of the action. And the stadium itself, as we all know, is a great place. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and kind of take off from the game day experience and talk about something that's really, really cool about having a pro team, and that's that every match is on TV. So if I've got something else going on and I come home, I've got, maybe a couple of games on the DVR that I need to watch, or I'm in the stadium, in the supporter section, don't get to see every detail of the game. I come home, I sit down, I got Pete Pranica and JJ Greer. They do a fantastic job as a duo calling the games. CW30 has been on top of it. They've made it a top priority. And it's not one of those things where it's like, Memphis 901 FC will not be seen tonight due to, and it's just some random thing that takes priority over the soccer games. It has been a top priority for CW30. And then every match is on ESPN Plus. So if you miss it during the week, you could always go on ESPN Plus. There it is. It's stored. It's logged. You can sit down. You can watch it. You can have it on in the background. If, some things were a little bit unclear on the other end of the field and you couldn't see it that well, you can always go back and watch it. I love having every Memphis 901 FC match on TV.
Yeah, it's difficult for me. I got a 10-year-old son. My wife and I both work. Got a 3-year-old daughter that's a little on the crazy side, so it's really difficult to find time to actually get everybody up to the game. So relying on that ability to go back and watch the game live, the first, and then like you said, go back and watch it after the fact. I like to go back and kind of rewatch games a lot of times and focus on certain things. How are we defending this game or something? And so it helps to be able to go back and access that all the time. And again, it's all about accessibility to your fans, and being in the USL and that deal with ESPN Plus has been a great benefit.
The other thing is, Pete and JJ are actually talking to coaches and players, and then they kind of fill us in on the broadcast on some things that you don't get in the stands. And it's great to be in the stands, but, on the broadcast you can hear some things. Well, I was talking to Coach McQueen this week, and he said this about this player. And you kind of learn something about the player that you didn't know before. Or here's Adam Najim, and let me tell you about this story about his relationship with his brother, who also has had a call-up on the Afghanistan national team, and those kinds of things, And so it's been really cool to hear all those stories and just the little things that go along with having a TV broadcast. So I've been really cool with that. All right, what else you got on your list?
I think finally for me, and you kind of touched on it there with the Pete and JJ thing, it's been really cool to see how quickly local media has gravitated toward the club, and even people that admittedly are not soccer people, right. They acknowledge that the experience across the board seems to be an amazing experience, and they're getting behind it. And that's been really cool to see, whether it's people on the radio, people on the blogs, or the commercial appeal as a whole. It's been really cool to see that.
You can just look down at the Guitar Smash and you see like a semicircle of people who are filming it for, let's say it's WRAG, or maybe they're covering it for the Daily Memphian, or maybe the Memphis Flyer or something like that. We have a Ambiente 1030, Tony and those guys over there at that radio station, are there every match. Just saw Tony up at the press box last week. It's really, really great to have some coverage that we never got with Memphis City. They acknowledged our presence maybe once or twice, but and then we have one of our guys here from the 901 Soccer Podcast, Caleb Hilliard, who is working with WREG. And, we've also got Lawrence Dockery from World Soccer Talk. So we've got some folks who are in other media outlets that are kind of helping us out. But we also have people who are, as you mentioned, seeing soccer for the first time. And they're just admittedly, they're just like, look, I don't know anything about soccer, but we're still going to cover it. And I'm totally okay with that. I'm very leery about saying, if the market demands it, fine. But I'm very leery about demanding that we talk about tactical breakdowns the way that we would talk about the Grizzlies. Because as a general rule, I don't want to listen to people who don't know what they're talking about talk. Right?
Sure.
So you got a guy who is a basketball guy and he's been covering basketball for 30 years, and you're asking him to talk soccer tactics. It just comes across as weird. I'm just glad they're there at all. So I've had no problem, and I'm glad also to see a guy like Jarvis Greer, who does have a soccer background, was a Memphis Rogues announcer, and his son is one of our announcers. He led off a broadcast, a sports broadcast on WMC with Memphis 901 FC highlights, even though it was like a big day where the Memphis Tigers got a big basketball commit, but the main story was Memphis 901 FC. That would not happen if we didn't have a pro team in place. So I think it's been a very good thing. All right, this is our club and country podcast. So let's switch gears and talk about our country for just a little bit here. I'm going to let you lead off, Isaac Walker. We're going to talk about some things that are going on in our country, and we're going to just kind of figure out where we are at the midpoint of 2019. Where are we as a soccer nation? What is the first thing on your list?
I think it is the growing body of evidence we have for Greg Berhalter and the U.S. men's national team, the senior team. So we're probably, 8 to 10 games in. I don't know the exact number. 8 to 10 games in, have a pretty good body of work. And there's a lot of positives to see. There's still some, head-scratching negatives, I think, from my perspective. But, it beats losing to teams. I mean, just take the Gold Cup, for example. We're 2 games into the Gold Cup, play Trinidad and Tobago, and it looks a little shaky at first. But the end result is what you would expect a U.S. men's national team result to be against an opponent like that. Whereas you couldn't necessarily have said that the previous 4 years, I guess, for that matter. You couldn't have said that. So he seems to have solidified on the whole his main roster, and then he's changing out a handful of others. It's a little concerning to me how much he's relying on MLS or deferring to MLS players, and that's not a knock on MLS players. It's just going in, you worried, okay. I'll give two-player examples. You see Will Trapp and you see Giassi Zardes, and it's like, what do they both have in common? MLS guys that have played for Berhalter in the past, and I don't know that that's necessarily a problem if you're performing, and so then the question becomes, okay, are these guys performing enough to be sitting guys like Josie Altidore or not inviting a Josh Sargent or stuff like that? But I'll say it's good to be having those types of conversations as opposed to how do we steady the ship. I think the ship has clearly been steadied. Whether Berhalter is successful long term or not, I still, the jury's still out on that. But I think on the whole, I think what you're seeing is stability and then improvement, and that's a start.
I would say that I have no problem, none, with the MLS guys being your B team. I think that's what you want. I think that's the ultimate goal. If the MLS guys are your B team, then you're falling in line with the Argentinas and Brazils, who you do occasionally see a guy on the Argentina roster who plays in the Argentine league. Occasionally.
Sure.
But your starters on the Argentina team, if they're at full strength, are obviously going to be European-based players in the most likely the top 5 leagues in the world. Brazil is the same way. Brazil does occasionally roster a player who plays in the Brazilian league. But your starters are going to be playing for major European clubs. I want to see us get to a place where all of our starters are playing for big-time clubs. I've changed my tune on that because I've always been like, well, if we just keep sending our best players to Europe, then our own domestic league is not going to get better. In this half of the world, it's always that way. I'll tell you who changed my mind on that. Santi Moore, who played for Memphis City FC in his first year. Santi Moore told us on this podcast, actually on the Rogue Report, that their coaches in Colombia always told them, go straight to Europe. Don't even worry about our domestic league. If you're a top player, your goal, they tell all the kids that. Your goal is to play in Europe. And it's the same thing as in basketball, a Lithuanian kid growing up, and his goal is to play in the NBA, right?
Sure.
So we are if we can get to a point where we are pushing our kids to play in Europe, and then we have MLS guys as our B team, and then those guys maybe eventually earn a European contract, great. That hasn't always worked out really well.
Yeah.
But we've got more kids right now, and I'm talking about 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, either going to academies or one of those deals where, like we saw with the Canadian national team and Alphonso Davies, where Bayern Munich buys him, but they loan him back to Vancouver for a little while.
Sure.
Then when he's 18, he goes over to Bayern Munich.
Sure.
So we've got a lot of kids who are now in European academies or playing for like a European B or C team. The more that we have of that, the better off we're going to be as a national team in the long run. But like you said, when you're playing a team of lesser quality, you want to be able to kill them. And right now in the Gold Cup, we're 10-0 to the good. Nothing will ever take away from that loss to Trinidad and Tobago in October of 2017. So it's not like we can say, ooh, we got revenge. No, they will always be the winner of that match. There's nothing that can erase that. But when you're playing Trinidad and Tobago, you want to beat them 6-0.
Sure. Yeah.
And we beat them 6-0. And I think it was a legitimate 6-0. So that felt really, really good.
Yeah, I'm with you on board 100% there. And again, I think at this point, any criticisms of Berhalter, while fair, are probably a little bit of nitpicking because the results have been there. Those 2 warm-up games, I think
didn't look good.
They did not look good, but I think clearly, it didn't, right or wrong, motivation and effort wasn't exactly at its highest, and then on top of that, he's playing around. He's probably focusing on specific things he wants to see that they've been working on in training. To me, it's excusable when you're talking about competitive games, like the Gold Cup has been. They've been on point. I just with every coach, you're going to have why is so-and-so on the roster, why is so-and-so not on the roster, and then why is so-and-so playing in this position as opposed to this position. And so I think all that together is, for Berhalter, it's been a positive picture, and I'm ready to see how much we can take advantage of that.
All right, so first up on my list, I've got two things, and my first one is, and it's a very unfortunate one, and we're seeing this in both MLS and USL, empty stadiums everywhere. I think there's a massive disparity between reported attendance and actual butts in seats. And man, I'm seeing pictures from games, and I'm not talking about like in the first 5 minutes. I'm talking about in the 67th minute. In the 34th minute. You want to see a packed stadium. And even ones, there are some stadiums we can rely on to be packed. Sacramento, the other night, had a huge game where they won like 5-0 over Tulsa, right? On a Saturday night. It was a beautiful night in Northern California. Man, there were a lot of empty seats. It's going to be reported at 11,564 or whatever it is that they always report the same attendance in Sacramento. Houston Dynamo. That's a stadium that's fairly close to downtown. Empty seats everywhere. Everywhere. It's absolutely depressing. And it's not just there. I mean, you can look on any given night, maybe a San Jose game. You're always going to have like your Portland, Cincinnati, even Minnesota is now on board with their new stadium. They're probably going to be packed every night. Sporting Kansas City, you can almost just book it. That, you're going to see a really good visual on TV. Orlando City is one. I really honestly thought that it would be a packed house every night. But you can see the word Orlando spelled out in the seats on a lot of nights. Colorado looks miserable. FC Dallas looks absolutely pathetic in a lot of their attendance, like just watching a match on TV. Chicago Fire, they're going to move back to Soldier Field next year. At least that's the rumor. We're seeing so many, and it's USL does that. It's not just that. Charleston Battery, where our guy Andrew Bell used to be. I mean, there's a whole side of the stadium where nobody's showing up. Orange County Soccer Club, same thing. Even Nashville has taken a major drop off of what they had last year. And again, I'm not talking about reported attendance. Don't just look at the numbers. Look at the pictures from the game. Watch the highlights from the game. I'm disappointed with attendances across the United States. I can't help but think there is at least some correlation to not making the 2018 World Cup.
I'd say yes, but then I would also say there's other factors that are coming into play too. I think obviously when you're talking about an event like Gold Cup, for example, you're probably looking at over half the attendance that's going to be non-U.S. fans, if you're being completely honest with yourself. That's just how it goes. And then in these MLS stadiums, you're kind of looking very similar. That ratio of national to international domestic U.S. fans versus fans of other national teams is probably pretty even. And so I wouldn't expect the U.S. national team's poor attendance to have that big an impact. I think what you're seeing is, one, you're seeing TV play a huge role. The fact that you can watch any of these games actually hurts the attendance. I mean, you've seen it in college football where attendance is down in the college football. So, I mean, it's the access of people at home. It makes it easier to say, you know what, we're not going to go to the game. The second thing is you're not seeing a decline in ticket prices. I mean, we're in a situation where, 901 actually has very reasonable tickets. But, Gold Cup, I tried to buy Gold Cup tickets. I couldn't buy Gold Cup tickets. It was the number of hoops I had to jump through to buy them. To buy them through the organization themselves made it impossible. And then when you go to try to get them off StubHub, it's like, I'm not going to pay $115 per ticket to go to these things. So it kind of makes a little bit of sense to me from that perspective. Now, we'd love to see, stadiums sold out, but I just, to me, I'm not as worried, especially when I see the TV numbers. The TV numbers are what I've been watching, and if you look at those, everything is up on the TV numbers from a viewership perspective. So that's pretty cool.
All right. What else you got on your list there as far as the things that we can look at the midpoint of 2019 and kind of take stock of where we are as a nation?
So obviously the U20, if you're a U.S. national team, you've been looking at the younger player pool for a while now, and we're to the point where these guys are starting to break in with the senior team. A lot of these guys are signing deals with big time development academy teams overseas in premier leagues. And so the U20 World Cup was earlier this summer. The U.S. Lost to Ecuador, went out maybe a round earlier than they should, like in the round in the quarterfinals, or it might have been the round before that. I can't remember, but they lost a good game. I think Ecuador ended up making it pretty far. So I mean, I'm not as worried about that. But I think what you saw the quality of these young kids. Because even though it was a U20 World Cup, you saw a lot of guys that would have been eligible for a U17 World Cup if that were the case. And on top of that, you had a lot of guys that would have qualified for that team that weren't on it. Your Josh Sargents and stuff like that. So it was really exciting to watch them play. I thought you saw a lot of positive individual contributors. Richards played phenomenal. You had Alex Mendez doing a really good job. You had Sebastian Soto doing well. All across the board, you saw individual people at their positions that looked like really talented. Serginho Dest, he looked atrocious at times defending, but he looked phenomenal in the attack at times. And so I was really excited to see those young guys play. They played an exciting style for me. And I think we're in really good hands over the next 2 World Cup cycles.
That is really, really good to know. We combine that with the way that some of the younger guys have looked in the Gold Cup, and you say, well, all right, I think it would be ridiculous if for some reason we didn't qualify out of CONCACAF in these next anyway, for this next World Cup. Obviously, we're going to qualify for 2026 as the host nation. All right, the last thing I want to talk about would be that the women are still dominant for now. And I put for now in really big letters because, yes, they won a match by the score of 13-0. No question about that. That did happen. And Thailand, bless their heart, just bless their heart. But when you see them, and I intentionally avoided everything yesterday so that when everybody in my house went to bed, I could just sit down and watch that game against Spain. And something happened that I have been saying was going to happen for quite some time. And that is there are now other European nations. It's not just Germany. And it's not just Norway or Sweden. Those have been the big 3, Germany, Norway, and Sweden. Spain is catching up with the United States. They played us toe-to-toe that entire match yesterday. France is there. England, who has kind of historically been a nation that said, all right, we're going to pay a whole lot of attention to the men's game and not as much to the women's game. The women are now getting the attention that they deserve. Winning helps, Phil Neville helps. But there are, and then they also have, legit stars who are, the heroes of the young girls across that country. And the girls are playing the sport more and more. It's not just a sport for boys in England anymore. Europe as a whole is catching up. Barcelona was it Barcelona Juventus? The Women's Champions League final. I can't remember exactly who it was. The crowd was massive for a women's club match. And see, I think that above all things, and again, our club structure is going to just be screwed up all the time. Who was it? Lyon? Yeah, Lyon. Club Lyon. Olympique Lyon, is that who it was? So so Lyon and Barcelona played in Champions League final to a massive crowd. What they have that we don't have is a club system where the club has multiple teams. All right? So you're a Manchester City fan. All right? So Manchester City has a whole lot of clubs, right? Mm-hmm. So they've got the Manchester City men's team, the senior team. Then there's Manchester City U23s, Manchester City reserves, Manchester City U20s, U18s, U17s, 16s, 15s, and the list goes on and on. Manchester City ladies. Then you have New York City FC, the team in Melbourne, or whatever they're called, Melbourne City or whatever it may be. And Manchester City has this umbrella where they have all these teams. So, and as an Arsenal fan, I can tell you, Arsenal ladies, that's a really big deal, But, again, part of an umbrella. And that umbrella is being funded by worldwide merchandise sales, mainly because of the men's senior team. But what are we doing for as far as club soccer goes in the United States? We have a struggling NWSL, where there's turnover as to what team is going to be in what city. If we were to do what everybody says we should do, which is have a club system, then you would be looking at, instead of like Orlando and Orlando, you would have like Orlando kind of does a decent job of this. North Carolina does a decent job of this. But you would have the LA Galaxy ladies. And LA Galaxy ladies could be a big team in Southern California. There's players everywhere in Southern California. You could have New York Red Bulls. We know their academy system is great. They're producing players like crazy. FC Dallas is producing players like crazy. There could be FC Dallas ladies. There could be New York Red Bull ladies. That's happening in Europe. And that is why European countries are becoming more powerful. Our girls are still playing in college. Mallory Pugh did a year of college. Rose Lavelle was the number one pick in college. We've got these girls who are still playing in college. We're still dominant for now. But you're going to start seeing girls in Europe who are turning pro younger and younger and younger. You're going to see the European game get stronger and stronger and stronger. We can enjoy our dominance for now, but I can't help but think that unless we make some changes, we're not going to be able to keep the same level of dominance that we've had and enjoyed over the course of these last few years. I'm telling you, Spain went toe-to-toe with our women yesterday. And that was in the, round of 16? Or no, it was the round of 16. Yep. So we're used to cruising through probably the quarterfinals anyway. And so, I don't know, I just think it's a very interesting thing to watch. I know I sound kind of negative here, but I think it's a very interesting thing to watch going forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I go back and forth on this. If you look from an infrastructure perspective, the women's side of the U.S. development pyramid, if you want to call it, it looks very similar to an early 90s version of the men's, where you have so on the women's side, if you're not as aware, and I'm not an expert by any means, is you don't have top-down club approaches. So you don't have your league, your top-tier league teams having women's teams multiple divisions down. So what you typically have is you have these academies that start at youth levels, and they take you up as high as you can, and then they try to tie into the national team level. So you have Solar out in Texas. You have Lobos or Rush. Excuse me. You have Rush. Is another big club. Well, out of Colorado, but like the local Lobos team is a Rush team, and so it's really big. And so you have all these clubs that start at the youth, and then they're trying to work their way up. And so these and they get tied into the national teams. Player pools is what their ultimate goal is. But for the majority of their players that aren't going to make that, well, then what's the next best thing? Well, it's sending them to college. And so that's why you see the emphasis being placed on college. And the same was with the men's side, 20, almost 30 years ago. But now,
even to a lesser degree, 5 years ago,
right? But now at least you're starting to see that development of the tiers. And so what you're seeing is those Premier League teams over in England and in France and stuff like that, those top tier teams, they can do that because they're financially solid. I think once you start seeing MLS teams or top league, whoever those teams are, if they're not MLS, we get to the point where they're USL teams that eventually become MLS if we ever get there. Once you have some financial stability, then you'll start seeing that infrastructure. But I think you're right. I don't think it's going to happen quick enough to stave off the catching up that's occurring internationally. And the women's have benefited from the fact that women's soccer had been so largely ignored internationally until now, whereas the men's, soccer was always a predominant sport internationally, so we were behind the eight ball from the very beginning. So it's a little disconcerting to see that gap narrowing. And while we can put a 13 goal whipping on some teams, like you said, when you're playing quality teams, you're seeing those games get tighter and tighter. What I didn't like seeing was a team that out physical, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like they outplayed us physically. And what you started seeing was us backing off. Now we were able to capitalize on opportunities, but in the same sense, it was just we were usually the aggressors in years past, and that doesn't seem to be the case now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I know some people could say, well, we made a mistake playing out of the back, and that led to the Spain goal, and otherwise it would have been a 2-0 shutout. But it really seemed like that was a team that was going toe-to-toe with our women's national team. We'll see what happens in the as we get to we're going to have to play France coming up. May have to play England. There are going to be tough matches. Will we be able to win it all? We certainly have. That's definitely a possibility. No question about it. Definitely a possibility. It's not a failure if we don't win it all. But the gap is narrowing. The gap is narrowing, and it would be great to see. Just a little. It's been it's been very, very fun to be to kind of hang our hat in times where the men have gotten beaten down on occasions to just say, yeah, well, our women are still the best in the world. Is that spoiled on our part? Yeah, we're spoiled. There's no question. We're spoiled. We've had the best soccer nation on the women's side. Pretty much from the beginning of it. So, let's go all the way back to the 91 World Cup and say, yeah, we've had the best soccer nation. We've won the most World Cups, whatever you want to say there. But we want to maintain that, and I think structural changes are eventually needed. Well, I'm done with my list, man. That's my review of the year that was January through June 2019. I vote we do this again in December and just kind of see where we are as a soccer nation at the end of the year going into 2020, which will be a World Cup qualifying year. We'll start World Cup qualifying in 2020, and we'll have a whole lot more information at that time on where we are as far as Berhalter's system, and we'll know the fate of some of these U20 guys and where they're going to end up as far as club soccer goes. Probably, I would say, about mid-July. That's usually when you see contracts and those kinds of things, like as people are getting ready for their seasons to start in August and kind of scrambling to beat the deadline on these transfer windows. I can't help but thinking we'll see at least a couple more Americans head off to Europe in the next month or so. So that'll be something to be looking for. You got anything? Got anything else there? Are we good?
I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to the 901 Soccer Podcast. It's my first time on in a while, so obviously it got a little long-winded. That's just the way I roll. And we want you to head out July the 6th to AutoZone Park if you've never experienced that incredible opportunity for local soccer. Go out and support 901 FC against a team that we have beaten twice in Hartford Athletic, including the last time that we played them, which was in the city of Memphis, well, just outside the city of Memphis, a 4-0 shellacking, and maybe we can do it again. So go out July the 6th, 7 o'clock, or maybe even 7:30, AutoZone Park, Memphis 901 FC, and Hartford Athletic. Until we see you again, thanks for listening to the 901 Soccer Podcast.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.